The night the lights went out, I stood alone in the middle of Kane's table, my fingers resting on the last light switch. The dining room was completely silent. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator in the back kitchen remained. 8 years. 8 years of 16-hour days, of burned fingers and sleepless nights, of pouring every dollar and every dream into this tiny farm-to-table restaurant in Portland. And tonight, I was turning it all off for the last time. My hand trembled slightly as I flipped the switch. Darkness swallowed the room. Only the faint orange glow from the streetlight outside filtered through the large front windows, painting long shadows across the wooden tables I had built myself. The smell of rosemary and smoked cedar still lingered in the air, like the ghost of every meal we'd ever served. I closed my eyes, and just like that, the memories came rushing in. I could still see little Calista Vale, only 6 years old, sitting on a tall stool in the kitchen, her tiny hands carefully placing edible flowers on each plate with the seriousness of a surgeon. She would look up at me with those bright eyes and whisper, "Daddy, this one is extra pretty, for the nice lady who always tips." My throat tightened. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that the place she called our magic house no longer belongs to us? I thought family was supposed to be the one place you could fall and someone would catch you. Turns out, they were the ones who pushed me off the edge. This story is about what happens when blind trust meets greed. When the people who are supposed to love you the most quietly take everything you built and leave you standing in the dark, wondering how you never saw it coming. But more importantly, it's about the moment you decide that even if they took everything, they can't take your fight to get it back. I leaned against the wooden counter, the same counter where my father, Draven Rook, used to stand every evening counting the cash drawer with a satisfied smile. He always said, "We're family, Zephyr. We rise together." My mother, Seraphine Rook, would nod from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her voice soft and warm. "Blood is thicker than water, sweetheart. Never forget that." And my younger brother, Bastian Rook, he was the one who smiled the widest whenever a big party walked in. "We're building an empire, bro. Together." I believed them. God, I believed every single word. 8 months ago, I had proudly signed the papers that made all 3 of them official partners. I thought I was being smart. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was securing our future as a family. Instead, I had handed them the knife. A sharp pain bloomed in my chest as I remembered the night everything shattered. The late-night call from the bank, the frozen accounts, the forged signatures I never knew existed, the way Draven looked me straight in the eyes and said, "It's just business, son. You'll understand one day." I swallowed hard, fighting the burn behind my eyes. Outside, a light rain began to fall, tapping gently against the windows like quiet tears. I looked around one last time at the empty chairs, at the chalkboard menu still listing my signature dish, the one Calista helped me name Little Star Risotto, because she said it sparkled like stars on the plate. My little girl was waiting for me at home right now, probably clutching her stuffed fox, wondering why Daddy was taking so long. How was I supposed to tell her that the magic house was gone? How was I supposed to explain that the people she called Grandpa, Grandma, and Uncle had taken it from us? I pushed myself off the counter and walked slowly toward the front door, my footsteps echoing in the hollow space. My fingers brushed the brass handle, cold to the touch. Before I stepped out into the rain, I turned back one final time. The restaurant was dark now, silent. But deep inside my chest, something else was waking up. Something quiet. Something dangerous. Something that felt a lot like the beginning of revenge, wrapped in the shape of justice. I took a slow, shaky breath and whispered into the darkness, "This isn't the end, Kane's table. This is only the night before the lights come back on." Living among the ruins. The rain was still falling when I finally stepped out of Kane's table that night. By the time I got home, my jacket was soaked through, but I didn't feel the cold. All I could feel was the weight in my chest as I opened the door to our new apartment, a tiny 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an old brick building that smelled faintly of damp wood and instant noodles. Calista was already asleep on the couch, her small body curled under a thin blanket, the stuffed fox she called Mr. Whiskers tucked tightly against her chest. I stood there for a long moment, just watching her breathe. This was our life now. No more warm lights of the restaurant, no more laughter spilling from the dining room, just these four pale walls and the distant sound of traffic outside. Every night after that, I left the apartment at 5 in the evening, wearing a black chef's coat that wasn't mine. I worked the graveyard shift at a large chain restaurant downtown, flipping burgers and plating frozen salmon under harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry insects. The money was enough to keep the rent paid and food on the table, but every single shift felt like swallowing glass. I still smiled when I came home. I would kick off my shoes quietly, wash the grease off my hands, and crawl onto the couch beside Calista. She would wake up just enough to wrap her little arms around my neck and whisper, "You smell like French fries, Daddy." I would laugh softly and kiss the top of her head. But inside, I was screaming, because every few days the phone would ring, and it was always them. Draven Rook's voice would come through the speaker, calm and measured, as if he were discussing the weather. "Your brother made a few mistakes, Zephyr, but you were the one who rushed into the partnership without proper planning. Lack of experience, son. That's all it was." Seraphine Rook would follow right behind him, her tone gentle but firm. "We're still family. Bastian feels terrible about what happened. He's just still learning. You've always been the responsible one. You'll bounce back." They never once asked how Calista and I were surviving. They never asked if we had enough to eat. They only called to remind me that everything was somehow my fault. I kept those conversations short. I kept my voice steady. But every time I hung up, my hands were shaking. One rainy Thursday evening, I was standing outside the chain restaurant on my break, steam rising from a cup of terrible coffee, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Zephyr Kane, is that really you?" I turned around. Elena Voss stood there under a black umbrella, her eyes widening in recognition. We had gone to high school together. Back then, she was the quiet girl who always carried a notebook. Now she was one of the most respected food bloggers on the West Coast. She took one look at my tired face, the cheap coat, and the dark circles under my eyes, and her expression softened. "God, what happened to you?" she asked quietly. I tried to smile. It didn't work. We ended up sitting on a wet bench under the awning. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. But I told her enough. Elena listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached out and gently squeezed my arm. "You built something beautiful, Zephyr. Don't let them convince you it was nothing." Her words stayed with me long after she left. A few nights later, Marcus Reed called. He was an old friend from my brief college years now, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who owed me a favor from years ago. I hadn't spoken to him in a long time, but when I finally picked up the phone and told him what had happened, his voice turned serious. "Send me whatever documents you still have. Emails, contracts, bank records, everything." I hesitated. For the first time, fear twisted in my gut, real fear. What if digging into this made everything worse? What if Calista lost even more because of me? But then I remembered her small voice asking about the restaurant, and the fear slowly turned into something colder, something harder. The breaking point came on a quiet Sunday morning. I was making pancakes in our tiny kitchen when Calista padded in, still in her dinosaur pajamas, rubbing her eyes. She climbed onto the stool and watched me flip the pancakes for a while before asking softly, "Daddy, when are we going back to the magic house? I miss my special stool. I miss drawing on the chalkboard." The spatula froze in my hand. I stared at the bubbling batter, my vision blurring. How do you tell your 6-year-old daughter that the magic house is gone, and the people she loved helped take it away? I set the spatula down carefully and turned to her. I knelt, so we were eye level. My voice came out hoarse. "I don't know if we can go back there, sweetheart." Calista tilted her head, confusion filling her big eyes. "But why? Did we do something bad?" That question broke something deep inside me, because in that moment, I realized I wasn't just mourning the restaurant. I was watching my daughter slowly lose her trust in the world and in me. I pulled her into my arms and held her tight, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. "No, baby," I whispered against her hair. "We didn't do anything bad." But as I held her, a new feeling began to burn quietly beneath the pain. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was the first spark of resolve, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I couldn't keep living among these ruins forever. Not if I wanted to give my daughter back her smile. Not if I wanted to give myself back my life. The first crack in the silence. That Sunday night, after I tucked Calista into bed, the tears finally came. She had cried for almost 20 minutes, her small shoulders shaking as she clutched Mr. Whiskers to her chest. "I miss the magic house, Daddy. I miss the smell when you cook. I miss drawing stars on the big chalkboard." Her voice cracked, and each sob felt like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. I held her until she fell asleep, but sleep didn't come for me. I sat at the tiny kitchen table under the dim yellow light of a single bulb, staring at the darkness outside the window. Something inside me finally broke. I couldn't keep swallowing the pain anymore. Not after hearing my daughter cry for the home we lost. That night, I made a quiet decision. I stopped pretending everything was okay. The next morning, while Calista was at school, I pulled out an old cardboard box I had shoved into the back of the closet. Inside were years of printed emails, signed contracts, bank statements, and screenshots of text messages I had saved without ever knowing why. My hands moved slowly at first, almost afraid. Every time I opened a new folder, my stomach twisted. I read through the messages where Draven Rook had praised my generosity for making them partners. I found the emails where Seraphine Rook had sweetly asked me to add Bastian's name to more documents because family should share everything. And then, the ones that made my blood run cold. Late at night, with Marcus Reed on a quiet phone call, the truth began to surface. Marcus's voice was calm and steady on the other end of the line, but I could hear the edge beneath it. "Zephyr, these signatures don't match yours, not even close." He paused. "Bastian forged them multiple times." I sat frozen in the dark apartment, the phone pressed tightly to my ear. Marcus continued, his tone careful. "And the transfers. Your father moved large amounts out of the business account into personal ones. Your mother knew. She replied to one of the emails confirming the amounts. She never warned you." The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. I closed my eyes and saw flashes, Draven smiling at family dinners, Seraphine hugging Calista, Bastian laughing as he shook hands with suppliers. All of it now tasted like poison. For the first time since the lights went out in Kane's table, I didn't feel only sadness. I felt rage, quiet, cold, controlled. But I didn't explode. Instead, I started moving differently. I began organizing everything with a precision I didn't know I possessed. Every document was scanned, dated, and saved in a new encrypted folder. Every suspicious transfer was highlighted. Every forged signature was marked. Marcus helped me without pushing too hard. He would call late at night after Calista was asleep, his voice low. "We're not rushing this, Zephyr. We build the case slowly, smart, so when the moment comes, they won't see it until it's already done." I hesitated many times. Some nights, I would stare at the folder on my laptop and feel a wave of fear wash over me. What if this destroyed what little relationship Calista still had with her grandparents? What if fighting back made everything worse? But then I would remember her crying into my shirt, asking when we could go back to the magic house, and the fear would shrink just enough for the resolve to grow. I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing. Day by day, the quiet father who had been swallowing his pain began to change into something sharper. I still smiled at Calista every evening. I still made her pancakes on Sundays. But inside, a new version of me was waking up, one that understood the difference between forgiveness and self-destruction. One late evening, after another exhausting shift, I sat alone at the kitchen table again. The apartment was silent, except for the soft ticking of the clock. I looked at the thick folder of evidence glowing on the screen. All the lies, all the betrayals, all the ways they had taken what I built with my own hands and called it family business. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. Because when you've already lost almost everything, the only thing left is the truth. And the truth can be the most powerful weapon of all. I closed the laptop slowly, the soft click echoing in the quiet room. Outside, the city lights of Portland shimmered through the rain-streaked window. I didn't know exactly when or how it would happen, but I knew one thing for certain. The silence was about to crack, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. The quiet reckoning. The folder on my laptop had grown thicker with every passing week. I moved through my days like a man walking on thin ice, calm on the surface, but every step calculated. Marcus Reed guided me with quiet precision. Late-night calls became our ritual. He reviewed every document, every transfer, every forged signature, turning my pain into cold, undeniable evidence. "You're not rushing this," he reminded me one night, his voice steady. "We build it so tight they can't wriggle out." I listened, and I prepared. At the same time, I reached out to Elena Voss. We met in a small coffee shop on the edge of the city, away from prying eyes. She listened as I spoke in low tones, her notebook open but her pen still. When I finished, she looked at me for a long moment. "I won't sensationalize it," she said softly, "but people deserve to know what really happened behind that charming family story." She began posting carefully worded pieces, subtle at first. Stories about the hidden cost of family businesses and what success really looks like when trust is broken. She never named names outright, but those who knew understood. I stayed silent in public. Instead, I filed the formal requests through Marcus, an independent audit of Kane's table finances and a temporary freeze on certain shared assets. The paperwork moved slowly, deliberately, like a tide that couldn't be stopped once it started. I still worked the night shifts. I still came home to Calista with a tired smile. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer waiting for things to get better. I was making them better. Then came the Sunday afternoon I had been quietly dreading. Draven Rook called and insisted on a family meeting. His voice carried that familiar tone, the one that used to make me feel small. "We need to put this behind us, Zephyr. For everyone's sake. Especially Calista." I agreed to come. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I knew the moment had arrived. The meeting took place at their house, the same house where we used to celebrate milestones and holidays. The living room smelled of Seraphine's lavender candles, just like always. Draven sat at the head of the table like a king holding court. Seraphine hovered nearby, her hands twisting a dish towel. Bastian leaned against the wall, arms crossed, avoiding my eyes. A stack of papers lay in front of Draven, new partnership agreements, forgiveness clauses, everything designed to make me sign away my rights and move on as if nothing had happened. Draven slid the documents toward me with a tight smile. "Sign these, son. We forgive each other. We rebuild as a family. It's the right thing to do." The room felt suffocating. I looked at each of them slowly. My mother's eyes were pleading. My brother's jaw was clenched. My father's expression was calm, but I saw the calculation behind it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my fist. Instead, I spoke with a quiet steadiness I had never found before. "No." The single word hung in the air. Draven's smile faltered. "I'm not signing anything," I continued, my voice low but clear. "Not while there are forged signatures in the original contracts. Not while thousands of dollars were moved without my knowledge. Not while the three of you knew exactly what was happening and chose to stay silent." Seraphine gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. Bastian pushed off the wall, his face flushing red. Draven's eyes narrowed. "You're making accusations you can't prove," he said coldly. "I can prove them," I replied, "and I already have." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. I stood up slowly. "I'm not here to destroy this family, but I am done letting it destroy me and my daughter." At that exact moment, I heard a small sound from the staircase. I turned. Calista stood halfway down the stairs in her yellow pajamas, clutching Mr. Whiskers. Her wide eyes were fixed on all of us. She had heard everything. My heart cracked wide open. The look on her face, confusion, fear, and a deep, quiet hurt burned itself into my memory. Draven tried to speak again, but I was already moving. I walked to the stairs, scooped Calista gently into my arms, and held her close. "I'm sorry you heard that, sweetheart," I whispered against her hair. She buried her face in my shoulder without saying a word. As I carried her out of that house, I felt the full weight of what I had just done. I had drawn the line, and lines like this, they cost something. They cost comfort. They cost relationships. Sometimes they even cost the last pieces of your old life. But as I buckled Calista into the car and drove away through the Portland rain, I realized something important. For the first time since the lights went out in Kane's table, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting for what was right. And even though my hands were shaking and my chest ached with guilt and fear, I finally felt free. The quiet reckoning had begun. Now there was no turning back. Rebuilding the table. 6 months can feel like a lifetime when you're fighting for what's yours. The small courtroom smelled of polished wood and old paper. I sat alone at the plaintiff's table, my hands resting quietly on my lap. Marcus Reed sat beside me, calm as ever. Draven, Seraphine, and Bastian were on the other side. None of us looked at each other for long. The judge's voice was measured as he read the final ruling. Every word landed like a quiet hammer. Kane's table was returned to me in full. The forged signatures, the unauthorized transfers, the deliberate silence, all of it had been laid bare under the law. Draven, Seraphine, and Bastian would face financial consequences and a permanent stain on their reputations in our small food community. I didn't feel triumph when the gavel came down. I only felt a deep, aching exhaustion, mixed with something fragile that might have been relief. Outside the courthouse, a light Portland mist was falling. Elena Voss was waiting on the steps. She didn't say much. She simply hugged me once, tightly, and whispered, "You did it the right way." Marcus stayed a little longer. Before he left, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "If you ever need a permanent advisor for the restaurant, I'm here." I nodded, unable to speak. That afternoon, I stood alone inside Kane's table for the first time since the night I turned off the lights. The space felt both familiar and foreign, like greeting an old friend who had been through a war. I didn't want to rebuild the same place. I wanted to create something new, so I renamed it. Second Table. The concept was simple, yet deeply personal. Every evening, we would set aside a portion of the night's meals free of charge for people who had been hurt by misplaced trust, family betrayals, business partners who stole, friends who disappeared when it mattered most. The menu stayed true to my farm-to-table roots, but now every dish carried a second meaning, a second chance. Elena helped spread the word gently and honestly through her blog and social media. She told the story without bitterness, focusing on healing rather than revenge. Slowly, people began to come. Some came out of curiosity. Others came because they recognized their own pain in the story. Marcus became a quiet partner in more ways than one. He reviewed contracts, advised on legal protection, and occasionally showed up to help move heavy kitchen equipment with his sleeves rolled up. Life didn't magically become easy. There were still nights I woke up with my heart racing, remembering Calista's face on the staircase that day. There were moments I questioned whether drawing that line had cost her too much. But then I would look at my daughter and see something new growing in her eyes, quiet strength, and the beginning of trust again. The grand reopening happened on a cool spring evening. Soft lights glowed once more through the large windows. The smell of rosemary and slow-roasted vegetables filled the air. Local musicians played softly in the corner. And in the middle of it all stood Calista Vale. She was holding a small handmade sign she had worked on for days. The letters were written in bright, slightly crooked crayon. "Home is where we start over." I knelt down in front of her, my eyes stinging. She looked up at me with that serious little expression she sometimes wore when she was thinking hard about the world. "Daddy, is this our new magic house?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled. "Yeah, baby. This one is ours, and we get to make the rules this time." She reached out and placed her small hand on my cheek, the way she used to when she was even smaller. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Those 4 words nearly undid me. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the kitchen was quiet again, I stood behind the counter watching Calista carefully arrange fresh flowers on the tables. The warm light caught in her hair, and for a moment I saw not just my daughter, but the future we were building together, brick by brick, meal by meal, truth by truth. I realized then the deepest lesson of all. Justice isn't about destroying the people who hurt you. It's about refusing to let their choices define the rest of your life. It's about protecting what remains and having the courage to build something better from the ashes. When you finally stand up for the truth, you don't just get back what was taken. You discover a stronger, wiser version of yourself, and you give your children permission to become that version too. I walked over to Calista, picked her up, and spun her around once, listening to her laughter fill the room. Outside, the Portland rain had stopped. Inside second table, the lights were on again. And this time, they were shining brighter than ever. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Your presence means more than you know. If today's story awakened something inside you, don't let the trail end here. There are many more tales of courage, devotion, and faith waiting to be discovered. Subscribe, comment, share, and come back as we continue this unforgettable journey. Thank you, truly. Aviso Legal. Disclaimer. All stories are intended solely for entertainment and may include fictionalized scenarios or dramatization derived from historical contexts. While AI assists in production, human creators supervise and adjust every piece to maintain sincerity, credibility, and emotional quality. We adhere entirely to platform regulations regarding AI content, ensuring no deepfakes or misleading portrayals. Licensed materials are used responsibly. Republishing, modifying, or extracting content without authorization is not allowed. We appreciate every viewer who respects originality and creative effort.